Men's possible negative and positive perceptions of the feminist movement and why this matters. In Republic, Plato argues that democracy is not the most ideal system, believing that it gives everyone equal rights and voice, but that not everyone has the wisdom and ability to govern. Democracy may not be the most perfect and efficient system when viewed objectively, but it is currently used in all developed countries. This suggests that the validity of a social system and social change lies not only in the assessment of macro-developmental data, although this is an important part, but also in the subjective acceptance of the social system by the people who make up the society. The same is true of the feminist movement, and since the purpose of feminism is essentially to fight for the interests of the female group, it can be assumed that feminism is generally accepted by the female group. Then if feminism is also accepted by the male group, it can become a universal moral concept, social justice, that covers almost the whole of the society, human race. Therefore, analyzing the positive and negative perceptions that the feminist movement may have brought to the male population should be seen as an important part of learning about the feminist movement, or at least as an important part of men's understanding of the feminist movement. One of the reasons why men are opposed to, or not keen to support, the feminist movement is that they may believe that an increase in the interests of the female group means a decrease in the interests of the male group. In fact, this is not entirely unreasonable if one looks at it from the point of view of proportionality. If the interests in a society are considered as a whole, an increase in one group's share of them means a decrease in the share of other groups. Gender quota system means a system of enforcing a half or nearly half quota of women in government decision-making bodies, in legislative and judicial bodies, and in the management of companies. Tracy A. Thomas, an Akron School law professor, argues in her article, Reconsidering the Remedy of Gender Quotas, in the Harvard Journal of Law and Gender, that gender quotas are a pragmatic, rapid, and quantifiable system of eliminating the dominance of biased leaders. And Tracy A. Thomas believes that this system is consistent with the principle of jurisprudence that women should have half of the power structure because they are 50% of the planet. However, from a male perspective, when gender quotas are in place, this system of guaranteeing women jobs based on their gender actually constitutes institutional discrimination against men, or more purely from an interest point of view, it may be viewed as a system that harms men's interests, even if this system is designed to change long-standing, entrenched systemic sexism against women and is consistent with notions of morality and social justice in general. But according to elite theory and structural inequality theory, groups that benefit from the unequal status quo tend to maintain their advantageous position based the perspective of motivation when the unequal status quo is challenged rather than supporting the realization of equality. Thus, male group are likely to have negative perceptions when confronted with a feminist movement that reduces their benefits regardless of the fairness of such original benefits. As already mentioned, the essence of the feminist movement is that women want their gender group to achieve higher interests than the status quo. This means a redistribution of the interest structure between the female group, the LGBTQ+ group, and the male group, which is a process that each group needs someone to speak on behalf of the gender positions within it, creating ideas that represent the interests of the different genders, so that communication, negotiation, and consultation can take place between the different ideas. Males, on the other hand, because they are perceived as having a vested interest in the current structure of society, have had relatively fewer voices and ideas to advocate for the interests of the male group, and are comparatively more underappreciated. Robert St. Estephe, in his article Blacklisted from History, A History of the Men's Rights Movement, mentions that men's rights activists throughout history have led campaigns against alimony loopholes and fraud, the lenient sentences handed down by male juries to women who killed their husbands, and the irrationality of custody rulings, as well as the lack of guaranteed visitation rights and parental kidnapping. And many of these activities were supported at the time by female judges, female legislators, and prominent female journalists. However, Robert St. Estephe points out that the history of these men's rights activities is ignored today, a phenomenon he calls collective amnesia. In addition to the areas mentioned by Robert St. Estephe, where men's voices are needed, social issues such as whether women should be registered for the military service system, which is more of an inequality of obligation than an inequality of benefit, are less likely to be discussed if men's voices are absent. Of course, it makes sense that women are not obligated to accept the military draft due to biological inequality. Biological women, on the other hand, suffer the pains of menstruation and the possibility of bearing the pains of childbirth, which men do not have to bear. Males are likely to feel passive and insecure in discussions of gender issues when their own positions are not protected and when the other gender continues to propose concessions of power that should be made by the male community. In addition, this insecurity can be amplified in the online environment as disrespect and offense due to more emotional and irresponsible comments. Psychology professor Michael Carso suggests in his article The Myth of Toxic Masculinity that currently, in psychology, it seems to be culturally allowed and even expected to hate men, and therefore to blame all ills perpetrated by men on masculinity, and to attribute the capacity to perpetrate similar ills to all men. Michael Carso argues that the character defects referred to in the phrase toxic masculinity can occur in anyone and are not limited to one gender. He points out that it is inappropriate to attribute specific character flaws and the problems they cause to one gender, just as the causes of crime problems should not be attributed to a specific race. No, don't raise children to hate their own aggression. Instead, teach them to own it, accept it, and master it. Like masculine people do. Michael Carso claims that masculinity is positive and can be owned by anyone of any gender and play to its strengths. In addition, because feminists celebrate femininity and protest against the social regulation of women, men who accept this ideology will not want it to bring criticism and social regulation of masculinity. If men feel disrespected by gender issues or feel that they may be vulnerable to attack by feminists because of their gender identity, this is not conducive to the acceptance and support of feminism by the male group. The feminist movement is changing the structure of the distribution of interests, while at the same time making it possible to expand the total number of interests in society. And from this point of view, the male group is also part of the beneficiaries. According to liberal economic theory, individual freedom is an important contributor to economic freedom and economic development. When the rights and freedoms of the female group are enhanced, women will be able to participate more in economic activities and have more access to education and skills training, which will increase the labor force participation rate of the society as well as bring about the enhancement of human capital. In the article, Empowering Women is Smart Economics, by World Bank economists Anna Ravenga and Sudhir Shetty, published in the International Monetary Fund, IMF journal, Finance and Development, they note that, with women now representing 40% of the global labor force and more than half the world's university students, overall productivity will increase if their skills and talents are used more fully. In addition to this, the article suggests that when women are able to control more money and household resources and decide on more household expenditures, children benefit from more child-specific expenditures, such as education expenditures. This femininity may be linked to women's traditional social roles and may be internally contradictory to female liberation, but it can still be taken as an objective law in the context of the world in general at the present time. And women's participation in decision-making bodies can make social development more responsive to the actual needs of society, for example, by focusing on public goods, such as water and sanitation, which are more important to women, to enhance the security and stability of society. These effects of women's empowerment are beneficial to society as a whole, including male group. In the conflict theory, Marx believed that the contradiction between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat was a fundamental contradiction that could not be reconciled. Different theories have different views, but this theory at least reflects that the conflict between the two classes is relatively serious and there is great difficulty in reconciling it. However, while there is a similar unequal distribution of benefits between women and men, there are more obvious aspects of the two groups that go beyond the zero-sum game. Many of the people with whom men form intimate relationships are women, such as female partners, daughters, and mothers. Men's strong altruistic motivation toward others in intimate relationships will naturally want these females to improve their situation in the outside society and want them to avoid being treated unfairly. When men live only in a purely masculine social environment, it is difficult to have a practical need to empathize with women. But when men live in family, love, and friendships that are based on intimate relationships between men and women, they develop respect and empathy for women from within the intimate relationships and want and support the advancement of women's rights. Freedom is a concept that transcends the zero-sum game more than interests do, and the freedom of women brought about by the feminist movement benefits the freedom of men at the same time. In the article, Why Feminism is Liberating for Me, Tobias Troll, a representative of the organization Gender Justice, argues that dichotomies kill details and possibilities in life, while feminism liberates men by deconstructing traditional gender roles. As Tobias Troll states, as a heterosexual young man, I didn't have to be fond of football. I could hang out with gay friends and enjoy the exploration of what is female and gay, straight and queer in myself. Through gender equality, men will also be able to stop being confined to traditional gender roles, will no longer have to deal with social expectations such as being the breadwinner of the whole family, which brings a lot of pressure, and will be able to be more socially permitted to express their inner feelings, to stop determining their hobbies, appearance, and so on the basis of gender stereotypes. In the functionalist view, society tends to remain stable and harmonious. This view explains why many public-oriented cultural products for the public and statements by public figures avoid sensitive topics in order to avoid resistance and attacks from the more radical elements of feminist activists, or pander to feminist views as much as possible in order to avoid possible losses. Although this does objectively fulfill and propagate some of the demands of the feminist movement, this fear of the cancel culture cannot be fully equated with respect for women and acceptance of feminist ideas. By understanding what aspects of the feminist movement may be difficult for men to accept and recognizing that the feminist movement objectively cannot be completely harmless to men's interests, and at the same time exploring what parts of the movement may be the reason for men's support for the feminist movement, it will help people to estimate the course of the gender issue in the future in a more reasonable way and help to shape a more socially acceptable gender viewpoint in a broader sense.